I have been completely blown away by the response to my Dressing a Tudor Queen video, and I just want to thank you for watching and subscribing and being interested in my work. It occurred to me that I should do a deeper dive into something that I really just glossed over in that video, which is the gabled hood. I actually wanted to do a comparison between the gabled hood and the French hood since they are such iconic styles in Tudor fashion. But the more that I dove into the current research and theories about the construction of French hoods, the more I realized that French hoods were going to need their own video because I just had so many questions and thoughts, and it really started to feel like... So I promise I will do a video all about the French hood craziness, but for now we're just going to focus on gabled hoods, or rather bonnets and frontlets as they were actually known during the Tudor period. Yep, that's right. Gabled hood is not a term that we see being used in the 16th century to refer to this style of headdress. It's one of those names that costume historians came up with years ago, and it just kind of stuck, probably because they've always been seen as the counterpoint to French hoods. But when you actually look at the documentation, such as bills, inventories, and letters, you see the terms bonnet and frontlet being used to refer to this type of headdress. One of the most fascinating examples of this comes from the letters of Lady Lisle, an English noblewoman living in France with her husband, who had been appointed Lord Deputy of Calais. She manages to secure a place for her daughter Anne as a lady-in-waiting to Henry VIII's new queen, Jane Seymour. But Anne only has French-style clothing, including French hoods. Fans of Tudor history may already know that Jane Seymour forbade the wearing of French hoods by her ladies because they had been the favorite of her predecessor, Anne Boleyn. Lady Lisle received a letter in September 1537 from her agent in England, John Hussey, who informed her that while her daughter would be allowed to wear her French gowns, she couldn't wear her French hoods. Hussey wrote, "She must needs have a bonnet of velvet and a frontlet of the same. I saw her yesterday in the velvet bonnet that my Lady Sussex hath attired her in, and methought it became her nothing so well as the French hood. But the Queen's pleasure must needs be fulfilled." A month later, the Queen had apparently changed her mind about letting Anne continue to wear her French gowns. Hussey wrote in October, "The Queen's pleasure is that Mistress Anne shall wear no more her French apparel, so that she must have provided a bonnet or two, with frontlets and an edge of pearl." Not only do we see the terms used to describe this type of headwear, but we also see the personal and political importance that clothing could have. So what exactly are bonnets and frontlets, and where did they come from? To see their beginnings, we need to go back to the very end of the 15th century, the late 1400s. This is actually a period that I have really wanted to make clothing for because I find it so beautiful and interesting. It's the transition between what we think of as medieval and Tudor or Renaissance clothing, and really has the best of both worlds in my opinion. Caroline Johnson has done incredible research into the clothing of this period, specifically the clothing and fabric mentioned in the Great Wardrobe accounts of Henry VII and Henry VIII, from about 1485 to 1520. Her research was published with the Tudor tailor in the Queen's Servants and includes patterns and instructions for making the clothing. It is a great resource if you're interested in this time period. Bonnets were the headwear of choice for elite ladies during this time period. There were a variety of styles, and the backs of bonnets could be rounded or pointed or just hanging straight. The frontlet is a decorative strip of fabric that is laid on top of the front of the bonnet. It could be made of the same fabric as the bonnet or of a contrasting fabric. There are some images that show a pattern on the frontlet, which may be embroidery or a woven textile like damask. Together, the bonnet and frontlet formed the fashionable headwear for elite women at the end of the 15th century. But by adding a stiffened linen frame called a paste underneath, you get the beginnings of that really iconic gabled shape. The style does seem to be uniquely English, which is probably why gabled hoods are also referred to as English hoods today. Now that we've seen what an early bonnet and frontlet look like, we can move on to the iconic 1530s bonnet and frontlet as seen on Jane Seymour and other ladies painted by Holbein. When I originally thought about making my 1530s clothing, I wasn't entirely sure that I wanted to make a bonnet and frontlet because I thought it would be really unflattering. But it also appealed to me because it is so unique and kind of strange to 21st century sensibilities, and not a lot of historical costumers make them. but my fears were allayed by Nina Michaela of the Tudor Tailor, who explained that most modern recreations of gabled hoods are too large and don't really follow the proportions that we see in period images, and that's what can make them look unflattering and kind of ridiculous. Luckily, the Tudor Tailor pattern takes this into consideration, and it's this pattern that I use to create my bonnet, frontlet, and paste. Now, full disclosure, this is not the same bonnet, frontlet, and paste that was in my dressing a Tudor Queen video. This is my new improved version because when I first made the bonnet, frontlet, and paste, I made them from the pattern exactly as it is, and I didn't make a mock-up first. After I made all of the pieces, I discovered that it was actually a tiny bit too small once I had my hair up on my head. I didn't think my hair would make that big of a difference, but it really did. So this time I made everything just a little bit bigger to accommodate my crazy thick hair, and I made sure to test out the new shapes before I committed to the actual fabric. I highly recommend making a mock-up in cardstock or cardboard to test out the pattern over your hair.
The bonnet of the 1530s is square-shaped with a split veil. We actually have a really helpful front and back view of a bonnet from the late 1520s courtesy of Holbein. My bonnet is made out of black velvet, which was by far the most common material for bonnets. Next comes the paste. The paste is what gives the headdress its iconic gabled shape. I created mine with a base of paste buckram from the Tudor Tailor, which is available in their Etsy shop. It's made out of coarse linen and stiffened with glue, just as it would have been in the 16th century. Millinery wire is also used to give added stiffness, and then the whole thing is covered in white linen. The edge is adorned with glass pearls and reproduction ouches or ouches, which are decorative jewels, from Truly Carmichael. For my frontlet, I chose to use two different fabrics together, which can be seen in portraits like that of Jane Seymour. Frontlets could also be heavily embroidered. Lady Lisle's letters reveal she arranged to have a frontlet embroidered by the Queen's embroiderer. To begin assembling the headdress, the bonnet is pinned to the paste. I find that I really only need a couple of pins, one on each side of the bonnet above the veil. The frontlet is then laid on top of the paste and pinned in place. It was also popular during the 1530s to flip up the ends of the frontlet onto the top of the bonnet. There is one final element that is still a bit of a mystery as to its form and function. Portraits and other images of women wearing bonnets and frontlets show a length of striped fabric that crosses at the forehead. It seems likely that this was originally the woman's hair, bound in ribbon, in two sections and wrapped around the head. Over time, the hair was either covered by the striped fabric or completely replaced by it. There's even this image of an unfortunate woman who has had her bonnet and frontlet knocked off, revealing her crossed hair underneath. I chose to interpret this as one long strip of fabric that I pin behind my hair on either side and then cross at the forehead. Then the bonnet, frontlet, and paste can be worn over this. It became fashionable to flip up one or both of the veils on top of the paste, as seen in Jane Seymour's portrait. This is something that I get a lot of comments and questions about. Yes, they really did that, and it doesn't seem to be for any reason other than fashion. I think it's pretty jaunty and adds to the sculptural look of the bonnet and frontlet.
One final thought I want to leave you with takes us back to the personal and political importance of Tudor headwear. As I mentioned earlier, Jane Seymour insisted that her ladies wear bonnets and frontlets because of Anne Boleyn's preference for French hoods. I've even seen people say that Anne Boleyn never wore bonnets and frontlets. However, one of the very few images of Anne Boleyn that we can confidently say was made during her lifetime depicts her wearing a bonnet and frontlet. It's a commemorative medal that was made in 1534 and bears her motto, "The Most Happy." It seems strange to me that she would allow an official image to be made of herself wearing something that she hated. Certainly, Anne Boleyn favored French hoods, and she became nearly synonymous with them, but I think it's a bit narrow-minded to say that she never wore bonnets and frontlets. Bonnets and frontlets may not get as much love as French hoods, but I hope this exploration of the style and how I made mine will encourage more people to embrace them.